The Wonder List with Bill Weir, Sunday at 10 on CNN.
If one person kills himself and also 149 people, another word should be used, not suicide.
Whether it was suicide, whether it was murder, or whether it was a combination of both, murder-suicide, it certainly raises a lot of questions about the co-pilot of this crash, his mental state. Joining me now to talk about mental health screenings for pilots is CNN's aviation correspondent Richard Quest, CNN safety analyst David Susi, CNN aviation analyst Les Abend, and CNN law enforcement analyst Tom Fuentes. Gentlemen, I'm glad you're still back with me. For starters, Richard, I just want to clarify something with regard to Lufthansa's mental health policy. The CEO, Carsten Spohr, who you said you know well, has clarified that the pilots do not undergo regular or routine psychological testing once they begin flying. However, Lufthansa does consider an applicant's psychological state along with other factors when hiring pilots. That is Lufthansa. What about the rest of the carriers in America and around the world? What's the rule?
In the terms of most carriers, it's similar to that. You've got your applicants. You obviously test their technical knowledge, their engineering knowledge and the like, and then you do a psychological evaluation of the person. Once they've got the job, no, there's no regular psychological, unless there's a reason. A depression perhaps, or there's some other sort of stress at home, and airlines are very careful at one level to ensure that they are monitoring potential stresses. There is an internal reporting system in most airlines that you can privately and confidentially both self-report and report somebody else that you're concerned about. But what you've got to be careful of is that you don't create an environment where you're spying on each other. You don't want to have a level of mistrust in the cockpit.
Well, now I wonder if that's going to change, because if, look, Les just mentioned it, how horrifying the thought is to not be able to trust the men and women with whom you're flying.
Right.
And might that change now?
But the trust goes into the regulatory system as well. You talk about the Aviation Safety and Reporting System, ASRS, which is the voluntary disclosure.
Voluntary, let's stress voluntary.
So voluntary disclosure goes into this database. Well, that was very good, and it worked really well until Congress decided that they were going to ask NASA, who was storing this information, to release it. They said, no, we're not going to do this. Then within about 6 or 8 years ago, they did release that information, which was supposed to be voluntary and protected, and it's not.
So can I just ask, and I don't know if you know the answer to this question, is there any sort of monitoring of pilots' social media, of their public footprints, anything like that?
That's privacy information.
If it's public, it's public.
No, nor should there be. Nor should there be. I mean, I agree what the events we've seen of the last 48 hours
leads you to think there should be.
No, this is your lone wolf. You know, in another environment, when we talk about other activities and criminal activities, this is the outlier.
Whether you believe the Egyptians or the Americans, it happened on Egypt Air as well. It also happened on, is it Silky Air?
Silky Air, there's a disagreement about.
And there's a disagreement about Egypt as well. But my God, if this has happened possibly 3 times, is it not time to change?
3 times in the size of aviation, Ashley.
But you're assuming that
you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people dying. Maybe 3 times, but hundreds and hundreds of deaths.
Right. But how would you monitor this idea?
And what do we know that psychological testing is effective in weeding out these people? And that's really the question we need. And I'd like to hear what Les has.
I want to bring in a question. We invited you to send in your questions. We got a good question from Olga Halaland. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Olga. And you've asked this: will there be an investigation into the co-pilot's family life and mental state? Tom Fuentes, what exactly will be happening on that front, if anything?
Absolutely. They'll look at every aspect of the co-pilot's life, not just his social media and emails and phone calls, but they'll be interviewing everybody that they can find that's close to him, that he might have had contact with, and trying to determine what type of things he was talking about. Did he give indications of having depression or financial problems or other issues that may come into play here, or being a depressed person? And back to the psychological testing, I think what the airlines are hoping is that a flight attendant or a fellow pilot is going to say, I don't want to be in the air with this guy and endanger my life. So if they see erratic behavior or see an indication, that they might turn that person in themselves for their own safety and the safety of all the passengers. So, and as David Susi just said, there's not really great reliable testing that's 100% foolproof anyway.
For anybody, you're absolutely right. Richard Quest, David Susi, Les Abend, and Tom Fuentes, stay with me if you will. If that co-pilot did in fact crash this plane on purpose, and that seems to be where all the indicators are pointing now, is he in fact a mass murderer? And if that's the case, does this airline bear any responsibility? That's coming up next.
When you're ready to take skincare to the next level, you're ready for ROC. New ROC Multi-Correction has an exclusive 5-in-1 formula. It's clinically proven to hydrate dryness, illuminate dullness, lift sagging, diminish the look of dark spots, and smooth the appearance of wrinkles. Together, these 5 elements create ageless-looking skin. ROC Multi-Correction 5-in-1. It's high-performance skincare, only from ROC. They're race walkers and space walkers, light walkers and fright walkers, wire walkers and fire walkers. Introducing Select Drive from Honda. Set your mower's speed range with the speed adjustment dial. Then engage the Select Drive handle to match your desired speed, or adjust your speed with the speed adjustment dial while mowing. In other words, a mower that adjusts to any walk of life. Learn more about Select Drive at Honda.com. Honda lawnmowers. Very smart. I went to Ancestry.com, but I thought, I'm not going to make it very far. I knew my parents and my grandparents, and then it happened. I got a leaf. When I clicked on it, I could actually see my grandfather's draft card from World War I and his U.S. Census from 1910, and another member's tree that had my great-grandparents and their parents and everything. And it all started with my first leaf. Who will you discover at Ancestry.com?
Technology gives you security. Technology gives you control. And now, technology gives you home security and control in a new and revolutionary way. Introducing Plug and Protect from LiveWatch Security, an easy-to-use wireless security system customized just for your home, controlled from any smartphone, tablet, or computer, and monitored by professionals 24/7. Go to livewatch.com to get Plug and Protect interactive security delivered to your door. No wires, no installers, just peel and place.
LiveWatch helps me stay in touch and in control.
Now you too can enjoy the home security you want for your family. You buy airline tickets without a travel agent. You trade stocks without a stockbroker. Now with Plug and Protect, you can protect your home without an installer. Try Plug and Protect in your home for a full 90 days. Included is our hassle-free guarantee. Plug and Protect is not available in stores, so go to livewatch.com right now. That's livewatch.com.
Sailing through the heart of cities and landscapes with Viking, you'll see things differently. You'll get closer to iconic landmarks, to local life and cultural treasures. It's a feeling that only a river can give you, that only Viking can give you. Spend less time getting there and more time being there. Viking River Cruises, exploring the world in comfort.
Good job. I don't know about you, but I don't like taking pills for minor arthritis pain or using those patches. Thanks, Stephen. But I found something that really works, Australian Dream. It doesn't smell, doesn't burn, isn't greasy, and it relieves my arthritis pain. Plus, Australian Dream has an empty jar guarantee. You use the entire jar. If you're not satisfied, return it for a full refund. I doubt that you'll send it back, though, because Australian Dream really works. You want real relief from arthritis pain? Get Australian Dream.
Got some breaking news I want to bring to you. This has just come into CNN from our justice correspondent, Evan Perez. A member of the Army National Guard, along with his cousin, have been arrested. And get this, they are facing charges of providing material support to ISIS. This coming into CNN via a government official. One man was apparently arrested for trying to, yet again, get on a flight to join ISIS ranks. Apparently the second was plotting to use his cousin's military uniform in order to carry out an attack on an Illinois military facility. Let me give you some of the details. The Army National Guard specialist's name is Hassan Edmonds. He's a U.S. citizen, 22 years old, apparently arrested at Chicago Midway International Airport without incident. Apparently the people who made the arrest were Chicago's FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. He was apparently trying to fly to Cairo in Egypt. The cousin is Jonas Edmonds, also a U.S. citizen, 29 years old, and he was arrested without incident, not in any airport, but instead at his home in Aurora, Illinois. Hassan Edmonds is a current member of the Illinois Army National Guard. Apparently, the charging documents suggest that he was planning to use his military training to fight on behalf of ISIS. Jonas Edmonds apparently asked the FBI undercover employee to assist in the attack and explained that they would use Hassan Edmonds' uniforms and the information that he supplied about how to access the installation and target officers for the attack. Just getting this information in now, but I'm also told that according to some of these charging documents, and I'll quote here from the Assistant Attorney General, in addition, they plotted to attack members of our military within the United States. Disturbingly, one of the defendants currently wears the same uniform of those they allegedly planned to attack. We're continuing to call the documents to find out more information, but yet again, disturbing news that we've heard before, but this time a member of the Army National Guard in Illinois, along with his cousin, both brought in on federal charges of material support to ISIS, one trying to fly to Cairo, Egypt, to join ISIS ranks, the other apparently plotting to use that man's uniforms, but it looks like there was an inside job in terms of the federal officials getting inside information by actually doing the work with them to get those quotes and get those plans and then make those arrests. We'll continue to follow that story. Other breaking news that we're also following, this airline crash in the French Alps. The pilot, who by all accounts, the co-pilot who deliberately crashed that passenger plane in those mountains, has a name, and now we have a picture. Andreas Lubitz, 28 years old, from Germany. Officials leading the investigation say he was alone at the controls despite the captain banging on the cockpit door, begging to be let back in. It remained locked. 149 other people were on that plane, and every single one of them is now dead. Crash investigators who have heard the cockpit audio recordings say the passengers probably did not know what was happening until those final few moments right before the crash. He says that because he said screams could be heard on the recordings. And the main thing getting in the way of the recovery is, of course, this treacherous geography. The Airbus A320 went down in a deep ravine far from any roads or towns in the French Alps. Crews have to be flown there by helicopter. They're dealing with sheer cliffs and ice, and of course are having to be lowered in by ropes and cables. There is no landing site anywhere near the terrain of the crash zone. So the CEO of Lufthansa says it is wrong to call this crash a suicide if indeed the co-pilot intentionally flew the plane into the ground. 149 other people on board that plane did not want to die that day. Richard Quest is back with me, HLN legal analyst. Joey Jackson is here. So the interesting thing is, Joey Jackson, I want to begin with you, is that there was early talk of a criminal investigation that may actually result in some sort of manslaughter charges, which to me originally, I thought, what's the point?
Watch the Lufthansa beginning pilots, they called ab initio pilots, train outside of Phoenix, Arizona. And that was a very thorough program. They were very carefully watched, very carefully screened, beforehand, before they showed up in Phoenix. And so this is a definitely an enigma. I'm almost absolutely sure that Lufthansa also has what's called an employee assistance program, so pilots can talk to counselors and so on if they're going through a rough patch in their life, some kind of disharmony, either romantic or financial or whatever. So this guy somehow fell through the net. I know we'll be examining, or they will be examining, how they can close these loopholes. But this was a young man. Now, the only other thing I'd want to say, Robin, is because of the global pilot shortage these days, they may be taking people that they might not have allowed into the program in past years. When I was there in 1975, I think they had like 100 applicants for every opening. So it was considered to be a very plum job. It was like getting an appointment to the Air Force Academy. And they watched those people very closely when they were in Phoenix. And I'm sure they did the same thing when they returned to Germany. They then went to Germany after getting their commercial license here in the States. And they flew in a training airplane in Germany for another 20, 30, 40 hours to get used to European airspace. So what I'm saying is Lufthansa is certainly a world-class organization, and but maybe, and somehow he slipped through, maybe this has to do with the global pilot shortage, but that's going to be up to the prosecutors and the investigators to discover in future days, weeks, and months.
Dr. Alan Deal, thank you so much for giving us some insight into this. Thank you so much. Well, I want to also now talk about how the families might be coping with this tragedy. I don't know how they could be trying to come to terms with this, but no doubt our Dr. Jeff Gardera, he's a psychologist, a professor of behavioral medicine at Truro College. Hi there, Doctor. Many of these family members have now all gathered at the memorial site. Some of them have been briefed in Marseille before by the French prosecutor. There's been a real effort by Lufthansa to bring people to either the scene or at least to give them a lot of information. Does that make a difference?
It does make a difference because it helps them connect the dots. They don't have to rely on their imaginations, and the imagination can go in a very, very bad place as to what may have been going on. It's better that they get the information firsthand, that one-on-one communication, and also better than just hearing it from the press or from the media. It makes it much more intimate and allows them to know that they are the priority right now.
And we're just seeing, as you're talking, images of buses leaving the scene.
It will be about the DNA. The other part of that is, of course, because they are together, they are a support group for one another and can grieve together. So that's very, very important. It's important for them to be able to say goodbye and see whatever is left with regard to that crash site. Of course, we don't want them to see, any parts of bodies, but knowing what the terrain was, what it looked like for them. As far as the pilot himself, I agree with you. This is a mass murder, but obviously someone who may have had definitely had some severe emotional issues, perhaps some sort of a drug abuse problem, we don't know, but certainly some sort of a mood disorder that he could do something that is so horrific, make a statement the way he did, instead of, for example, just taking pills and dying in that way, that he felt that he had to take everyone with him in that way. That speaks of an immense amount of rage and depression.
That will no doubt be a factor in terms of the investigation. Also, I know it's so difficult for any of us to try and comprehend those last moments, and it is always that question you ask in a plane crash: did they know? How long did they know? And by the details coming out from the sound on the black box, there was, at least in those last few moments, screams. They did know. How does that play into the way families understand and deal with it?
Well, that's going to make it even much more difficult for the family members because they now know that the deceased knew what was coming at some point, that they were screaming, that they were scared, that they were in terror. And so that makes the process of accepting this, especially since it was, they believe for it to be intentional at this point, that's going to make it so much harder for the family members and friends to be able to accept what happened, because it is so horrific. I wish there was a way that I could paint a pretty picture as to their coming to their end and doing it in a way that perhaps they were calm, but there is no other way to say it, that it was horrific for these people on the plane, knowing the way that they were going to die.
Dr. Jeff Gardera, thank you so much for that analysis. We saw there also images of some of those family members,
Yes.
all joined together. More than 15 nations, nationalities were on that plane, and now their families all joined together, bonded together in grief. We'll continue to cover the story on CNN. You're watching the International Desk. Thanks for watching.
We should be on the air at 6 o'clock as predicted.
Choose to go. Go where no one has gone before.
The skies over Baghdad have been illuminated.
Where no one else will go today. You can go in search of answers, only to find more questions. You might discover something unfamiliar, halfway around the world. Or uncover something unexpected, far closer to home. Sometimes you might need to look back to see how you got here and where you might be headed. And just when you think your journey's reached an end, you'll be surprised to find it's only just beginning. Wherever it goes.
What a delicious way to think about wealth. It shows who's getting how much and who's left wanting more. In today's business world, we want to know how money is made and spent and who decides where it goes. On Quest Means Business, we'll meet those people and hear their ideas, and along the way, help you find your profitable piece of the pie.
Quest Means Business, tonight only on CNN.
When you witness war, division in Israel, when you face the reality of famine, genocide, and natural disaster, you can't help but be affected. But these experiences are important, and they give us no choice but to ask questions. Would you condemn President Assad for 100,000 plus deaths? These experiences don't just make it possible for us to know where the story might go. They demand that we go with it.
Navigating the terrain at the Germanwings crash site is not easy. Between steep cliffs, frozen ground, and access only by helicopter, search crews have a very difficult task of trying to recover victims and clues. Well, Brian Todd shows us just what they're up against.
Investigators are mapping the debris field in the French Alps, where the aircraft is described as obliterated. Recovery teams are struggling to get to the wreckage, spread far apart, starting at an altitude of about 6,000 feet. Their challenge, navigating vertical slopes and deep ravines, is enormous.
They may have little cliff edges that they may have to pick things off of, so as they descend, they may have to stop. Similar to this, gather things, put them into a bag, and then keep rappelling down.
Dave Jockerman, a high-altitude mountaineer, has climbed stark peaks just like those in the Alps.
You're going to slide like this, so you're going to go down
We
this
rappelled with him off cliffs, into ravines, to see what the recovery teams are up against. Jockerman says depending on where the helicopters can drop those teams, rescuers may have to climb up or rappel down to get to the debris and the remains of passengers. They'll battle dangerous crevices, fatigue, and weather that can change in an instant.
It could be sunny and a bluebird day, and an hour later, clouds are coming over a ridge that you didn't see. Next thing you know, it's blowing 20, 30, 40 miles an hour and snow's coming down on you, rain's coming down on you. That will negate any kind of helicopter activity.
Those conditions stand between investigators and their ultimate goal, to examine pieces of this plane and determine what happened to it. Experts say if they can't get enough information from the cockpit voice or flight data recorders, they may have to piece this aircraft back together, like investigators did with TWA Flight 800.
Absent any additional information from the recorders, the focus is going to be on the front of the airplane. So any pieces from the cockpit area are going to be of particular concern right now.
John Golia, who investigated the TWA Flight 800 crash, says the teams may even have to piece together some of the plane's wiring to find clues. Long, painstaking work, he says, but worth it.
We could really see where the airplane came apart, the way it came apart, and the metal doesn't lie. When you run the pieces of the metal, the edges of the metal, through a microscope, they will actually tell you where the forces came to tear the airplane apart.
The debris field seems to be mostly small pieces instead of large chunks. Experts say that suggests a high-impact crash, and it also means that the recovery teams are going to have a tougher time trying to recover so many pieces from the crevices and ledges like this in those mountains. Brian Todd, CNN, Carter Rock, Maryland.
Okay, well, let's get an update on what the conditions are at the crash site today. I understand they're going to be cloudy, but tomorrow strong winds are moving in, which could interfere with the recovery efforts. Our Tom Sater has more. Hi there, Tom.
Hi, Robin. Yeah, today was not a bad day. We knew we had a nice window, and of course you could see from some of the reporters in the live shots the sun was actually, shining through. Again, as it was mentioned in that story, whatever happens in the ground doesn't mean that's the same when you get in the higher elevations. We see this time and time again, and it can't change on an instant where the clouds move in over a ridge. Our concern is this. Our storm system finally left. We knew the last couple days it had to get up into Poland. We've got another one in Tunisia, but that's going to stay with rainfall and the precipitation into Greece. Here is our approaching cold front. That was the next concern. The cold front isn't going to bring with it a massive amount of freezing rain or snow. That's very good news. The moisture is actually kind of fading away and it's dissipating. Unfortunately, what we're going to find are the winds kicking up. Now, when we look at the precipitation, we had a lot of snow getting trapped in the higher mountains to the east of our crash site the last couple of days. Really helped out. And not much precipitation expected for the next 24 to 48. But as this cold front approaches, and you'll see some precipitation, the concern is all about the winds, and we talked about this yesterday as well. The front will approach, and there'll be a few clouds possibly, but look at the winds. These are 90-kilometer wind gusts as we get into Friday. There's no way they're going to be able to get the crews into here with the helicopters. However, Robin, the crews that are on the ground most likely could still continue to find what they can to map and, of course, retrieve the bodies for the grieving families. They'll be able to do their ground work, but not tomorrow, working in the skies and the pilots and the helicopters.
Tom, thanks for that. Well, let's now go to our Fred Pleitgen. He joins me now live from Cologne in Germany, where he's just finished an exclusive interview with the CEO of Lufthansa. Hi there, Fred. Tell us about your conversation.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And we talked about a wide range of issues, Robin. Certainly, the two main points that we had, on the one hand, was, of course, how all of this could happen, how they knew that this was a deliberate attempt by the co-pilot to steer this plane into the ground, what happened in the cockpit or outside of the cockpit prior to him doing that. And then, of course, we also focused on the mental stability of the co-pilot as well. But first thing that we talked about was what exactly went on that flight. He said, Carsten Spohr, the CEO of Lufthansa, said that apparently once the plane reached cruising altitude, shortly afterward, the captain left the cockpit, and then as he tried to get back in, he said it's absolutely clear that the co-pilot did not let him in, deliberately did not let him in. Let's listen in to what Carsten Spohr had to say.
Apparently, after the captain has left the cockpit, he tried to regain access, where there were knocks on the doors, according to the French authorities, and the door was either kept locked or not opened in the way it was supposed to be. And that, for sure, is a clear indication that the remaining pilot, the co-pilot, didn't want the captain to return.
So he says he's absolutely sure that this was a deliberate act, and that, of course, is quite a statement there coming from the Lufthansa CEO. And I told you, we also talked about the evaluation of their pilots for mental fitness as well. He said that this was absolutely a single case. He says that the system that they have of evaluating pilots is one that has been in place for decades and has worked very well for them in decades. But he also did acknowledge that, of course, this was an awful thing to happen, and that therefore they would reevaluate the processes that they have. Robin.
Fred Pleiken, great interview. Thanks so much. We'll look forward to the full conversation. Appreciate it. Fred Pleiken coming there from Cologne in Germany. Well, you're at the international desk. I'm Robin Kerno. Stay with us. CNN will continue to have coverage on those developments in the crash of Germanwings Flight 9525. But next, Wolf Blitzer is up.
World politics, today's issues, and all the breaking news. Wolf, coming up next on CNN.
I want to make a difference as a journalist in the truth of what's going on. Hala Garani, CNN, we bring you the news through the eyes, through the opinions, through the vantage points of everyone who's a part of the story. Over the years, I've had the privilege and the opportunity to see people who are acting in extraordinary ways during extraordinary circumstances. I've been running gun battles. And that's an amazing front seat to history. Speak to a person directly affected, that is when you complete your understanding of the news. All of our journalists on the ground, our analysts in the studio, will take the viewers on that. It's topical, it's daily, it tells you everything you need to know in 1 hour. That is The World Right Now.
The World Right Now with Hala Garani. Tonight on CNN.
I'm Wolf Blitzer. It's 1 p.m. here in Washington, 6 p.m. in France and Germany, 8 p.m. in Yemen and Iraq, wherever you're watching from around the world. Thanks very much for joining us.
This is CNN Breaking.
And we destroy the aircraft. That's the stunning conclusion from the prosecutor about what led to the crash of Germanwings Flight 9525, and it marks a shocking twist in the investigation. The prosecutor now says the co-pilot apparently crashed the plane into the French Alps on purpose. Among the reasons for that conclusion, after the pilot left the cockpit, the co-pilot refused to let him back in, even when he was banging on the door and screaming. And the co-pilot activated the plane's fateful descent. The prosecutor says that can only be voluntary.
We can conclude that in all circumstances it's deliberate. At the moment, I consider it to be deliberate. First of all, refusing entry to the cockpit. Second, maneuvering the lever for loss of altitude. We've said it's not so much, but it is 1,000 meters a minute, as if he was landing. And we're above the mountains, aren't we? So, and there's no other airport which could receive an Airbus 320 anywhere near.
Officials with the airline's parent company, Lufthansa, say they're speechless that the co-pilot would deliberately crash the plane, killing everyone on board, 150 people. So what do we know about this co-pilot? He's identified as Andreas Lubitz, 28 years old, a German national. He had been with the airline since September of 2013. Let's bring in our senior international correspondent, Fred Pleiken. He's joining us live from Cologne, Germany. I understand, Fred, you just had an exclusive interview with the Lufthansa CEO. Tell us what he told you.
Yeah, absolutely, Wolf. I just talked to Carsten Spohr about a wide range of issues, of course, pertaining to this case. And there were two main points that he really wanted to get on. One of them was the mental stability of this co-pilot, of Andreas Lubitz. And he said there that there were absolutely no indications, at least to Lufthansa, to its evaluation system, that he might have been mentally unstable, that he might have had any sort of depression issues. He also said that he believes that this is what he calls an isolated case. This is someone where there was no indication of this. This is not an indication that perhaps their system of evaluating mental issues with their pilots might be flawed. However, they also said that they would reevaluate it as well. Now, of course, I also asked him how he could be so certain that all of this was done deliberately with criminal intent. Let's listen into what Carsten Spohr had to say.
Apparently, after the captain has left the cockpit, he tried to regain access where there were knocks on the doors, according to the French authorities, and the door was either kept locked or not opened in the way it was supposed to be. And that, for sure, is a clear indication that the remaining pilot, the co-pilot, didn't want the captain to return.
So he clearly said that the co-pilot did not want the captain to re-enter into the cockpit. Of course, then there was that struggle as the captain tried to get entry somehow. However, he also said that the door of that airplane would have been reinforced, and therefore it would have been all but impossible for the captain to get back in there. Now, the other thing that, of course, he wanted to make very clear is that the airline is absolutely devastated that this would have happened. He said that the relatives of the victims, of those 150 people who were killed, were informed before the media actually was. And he does say that, of course, they are going to be cared for moving forward as well, Wolf.
Do we know if this co-pilot, Andreas Lubitz, had undergone any type of psychological screening either before he was hired or during his period as a pilot, as a co-pilot?
Well, you know what? This is interesting because I talked to him about this as well, and he said that while there aren't any specific tests for mental fitness after you've become a pilot, the entire process of becoming a pilot, of undergoing the training, is one that puts cadets under mental strain all the time. It's part of being a pilot. They see what happens when these cadets are in stress situations. They see how good they are at multitasking under pressure, for instance. So he said the whole process is one that tries to evaluate whether these people are mentally strong. Now, again, I asked him whether or not they might need more safeguards in this in the future, not only with people who are trying to become pilots, but also with people who are pilots already, who are on duty already. And he said that he believes the system that Lufthansa has in place was one that is up to international standards, is one that has worked very well for the company over the past 6 decades. But he also said that, of course, in light of what happened, they are going to reevaluate that. But he also said that Lufthansa has a system in place that if someone is flying with someone who they believe is mentally unstable or has any sort of other issues, be it alcoholism or anything else, that there is a process of reporting anonymously, and that you have to report that person. And apparently with Andreas Lubitz, there were no other issues that he had with any other colleagues in the past, Wolf.
But we are told, Fred, that he did take a period of a few months during his training. He took a leave for some unexplained reason.
Yes.
Do we know why he did that?
No, we don't. And this was something that Carsten Spohr actually said earlier today as well, is that he did take a leave of several months. He said this was not something that's necessarily uncommon when people are trying to become pilots, but he said there was no indication to them or no knowledge that they had that this might have been due to any sort of psychological issues. Of course, that is something that very much is going to be looked into. This is something that now is a criminal investigation as well, and that's certainly the past of Andreas Lubitz is certainly also something that investigators are going to be looking into, and probably very specifically that time that he took off during his training, and see whether or not it might have had something to do with what happened here in the past couple of days, whether or not he might have had mental issues in the past that might have contributed or might have been a big factor in him bringing that plane down.
Our Fred Pleitgen in Cologne, Germany, for a standby. This certainly takes the investigation in a new direction, and it gives a lot to discuss. Former FBI Assistant Director. Les Abend is CNN aviation analyst. He's an airline captain and contributing editor for Flying Magazine. And Richard Quest is our CNN aviation correspondent. Peter, let's start with that locked cockpit. We understand why they now lock those cockpits after 9/11, after what happened on 9/11. But isn't there any procedure if one person, one co-pilot, is left inside for that pilot who may have gone to the men's room or whatever to get back inside?
Well, there isn't, and that's the problem. I mean, this process was initiated after 9/11, and there were widespread meetings and working groups to discuss what was the appropriate response. And the issue was we were facing a new type of terrorism that, you know, up until 9/11, pilots were instructed to cooperate with the hijackers. After 9/11, the decision was made we have to arm the cockpit door so it cannot be broached. And it was discussed, maybe we should give one of the flight cabin crew a special code. But there was no way that could be kept secret. And it was decided that the lesser of evils was, once it's locked, it's locked.
And that's it, unintended consequences in this particular case. The FBI now has been brought into the investigation at the request, Tom, of the French government, right?
Right.
What do they want the FBI to do?
Well, the FBI would be checking all of the databases here in the U.S., no-fly list, our terrorist watch list, and then...
For this co-pilot?
And the co-pilot, yes, and anybody else at the time, but the co-pilot specifically now. And the co-pilot also did some training in the U.S., so they would be looking at, in the places that he traveled, you see a picture of the co-pilots in front of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So, you know, they would be looking at who was he with, who did he talk to, who did he call, did he have a cell phone here in the U.S., and then, you know, they would run all of the phone numbers that they have, any other identifying information on him through FBI databases.
And so they learn as much as possible about this co-pilot, which is understandable. Les, this is all based on the information from the plane's cockpit voice recorder. They could obviously hear stuff that's going on inside the cockpit, even outside the cockpit. I want you to listen to what the prosecutor said, responding to questions about whether the co-pilot had some kind of medical emergency when he was alone inside the cockpit.
It does seem that he was breathing normally. It's not the breathing of somebody who's having a stroke or a heart attack. And he doesn't say anything, not one word. I repeat it, absolute silence.
Can they conclude from just the recording of the breathing that he wasn't in some sort of medical distress?
Well, you know, that's hard to say, Wolf. I mean, it's this young man was probably contemplating what he was going to do all that time. It was a short period of time at cruise altitude. It's very curious to me why that, you know, at that moment, only a short period of time in cruise altitude, the captain chose that moment to go to the lavatory, get a cup of coffee, and then he took his opportunity then. I mean, it almost seemed as that he was contemplating it, and then this was an instantaneous decision that he made. But I want to add to Tom Fuente's point with reference to how the FBI gets involved. The TSA also got involved long before he ever even got to his flight training, because he's got to be screened. Any non-U.S. citizen, I'm a flight instructor with small airplanes. I have to, if I'm going to flight instruct somebody outside of the United States, I have to indicate that on the application, and they're vetted to some degree. So that is important. But this whole thing is as an airline pilot, this hits me right in the gut. It's very disturbing to me. This is not something I would ever have conceived of from any of my fellow crew members. And in a way, one of my colleagues has destroyed the public trust. And this is so important to really understand and comprehend, and especially for the families. I just can't imagine.
Let me bring Richard Quest into this conversation as well. Lufthansa officials, Richard, they say the pilot in this particular case did nothing wrong when he went out of the cockpit. Let's say he was going to the men's room or whatever, that it was okay, apparently, to leave only the co-pilot in that cockpit, although I understand there are regulations, at least here in the United States, that one of the flight attendants is supposed to go into the cockpit, so there's at least more than one person in the cockpit at all time. Is that right?
Yes, there are two issues here, Wolf. The first is whether or not he did anything wrong leaving the cockpit. Well, the plane was already in the cruise at that point. It was a short flight to Dusseldorf, so if you're going to go and take a restroom break, that would be the time to do it before descent further down route. On the question of the two people in the cockpit, the US does have a two-person rule. The rest of the world does not. Some countries require it, others don't. Following MH370, some airlines insisted on a two-person rule. In the last few hours since this incident, Norwegian, which flies into the US and is a major, one of the I think third largest low-cost carrier in Europe, Norwegian has put out a statement saying that they will now require a two-person rule for their flights. Carsten Spohr of Lufthansa says that this is something they will now look at. But the truth, of course, is there needs to be a one-size-fits-all on this. It's ridiculous that some countries have one rule, other countries don't. There needs to be a consensus, and my guess would be that consensus is a two-person rule.
Yeah, that certainly does make sense. All right, guys, stand by. There's a lot more news coming in. How does a captain get locked out of his own cockpit? Will this incident force a change in those rules that Richard was just talking about? That's coming up, plus the families of the victims. They're visiting the crash site today. We're going to go there live. Lots happening. Stay with us.
I spend my life looking through the lens of a camera. My objective being to change the way people see the everyday. I'm a rooftopper. I'm fascinated by the Dubai cityscapes. A time lapse, it's really about altering reality because it's something that the human eye cannot really see as such. The Dubai Marina has been my main photographic playground for the past 6 years. It has really become one of the most awe-inspiring, iconic cityscapes. The great thing about Dubai is that it never gets old.
Azerbaijan, European charm of the Orient.
A continent on the move needs a bank on the move. By continually evolving to deliver greater speed, superior value, and by connecting entrepreneurs with opportunities globally. Get on board. Let's take tomorrow. Axis Bank. Speed, service, security.
Competing for gold at the Olympics and FEI Championships for my country was my childhood dream.
What truly inspired me was watching my hero compete at the highest level, and that gave me the hunger to win gold at future Olympic Games.
Equestrian sport is the ultimate representation of what human and equine athletes can achieve together. The bond between humans and horses is ancient. The Olympic Games are the true natural environment to showcase this at its most powerful.
The Abu Dhabi Film Commission presents Abu Dhabi, home to the world's biggest film and television productions. Stunning locations, epic facilities, and an incredible 30% rebate. Film in Abu Dhabi, a must-see destination.
$150 lives lost in a deliberate act. It now seems the co-pilot of Flight 9525, quote, wanted to destroy the aircraft. That assessment coming from the Marseille prosecutor Bryce Robin, based on what investigators have found. We know that the captain was locked out of the cockpit after he trying to force his way through the locked cockpit door. He was screaming, but was the crash planned all along?
It's too early to anticipate, but it's clear that the co-pilot took advantage of the flight captain's leaving the cockpit. Could he have known beforehand? I really don't know.
Let's get back to our panel to discuss all of this. Our aviation analyst, former NTSB Managing Director Peter Goals is here with me in Washington, as is our law enforcement analyst, the former FBI Assistant Director Tom Fuentes. Our business and aviation correspondent Richard Quest joins us from New York, and from London, our aviation analyst Les Abend. Should we really, Peter, be all that surprised if in fact the co-pilot deliberately decided, for whatever reason, to go ahead and take that plane and crash it into the French Alps? It's not the first time a pilot or a co-pilot has done something like that. There have been several relatively recent examples, haven't there?
There have been a number of cases. You know, in 2000, Egypt Air, the co-pilot flew that plane into the ground. There were reports
that was off of Nantucket, Massachusetts, killing more than 200 people.
240 people or some odd people. Recently, in 2013, in Mozambique, a very similar situation was reported involving a smaller plane, the Embraer 190. But again, the investigators indicated that one of the flying pilots was locked out of the cabin, and the plane was flown into the ground. And in general aviation, Les is a pilot. He trains GA pilots. It happens every year.
In general aviation, meaning private planes. There was that Silk Air incident, too. Although, Silk authorities denied that it was suicide, although U.S. officials believe it was. Is that right?
That's right. We were the lead investigators. The Indonesians invited the NTSB in to conduct the investigation. We did. We determined that the most likely probable cause was that the pilot had flown the plane into the ground. He had had some financial reversals, some other psychological issues. Indonesia never accepted that, but the NTSB investigators were quite confident that's what happened.
Well, let me get Les into this conversation. How do you prevent that kind of stuff? How do you know if a pilot or a co-pilot is having some sort of mental issue or whatever, and is willing to not only kill himself or herself, but also kill all the passengers?
Yeah, it's a good question, Wolf, but let's just say this is not an epidemic with airline pilots. Let's just assure the public that we don't have these major stress issues where this is something that we're considering on every flight. How is it happening? We are hired for a reason. We're hired because we're independent and autonomous enough to handle a lot of stress, and that we can deal with a multitasking situation, which also involves saying to ourselves, are we fit to fly? And matter of fact, in this day and age, before I took the trip here to London, had to sign something that specifically said, am I fit to fly? Am I fit to fly healthy-wise? In other words, do I have a cold, fever, something? Do I have enough rest? So am I fatigued? And this can translate also into the psychological aspect. We police our own, because we've been policing our own physical health all these years. We police our own. We're not psychologists. I won't go there. But the bottom line is, we know when somebody's having an issue. And I fly with some extraordinary people, and we do some. These folks, even if they're having some problems at home, are able to compartmentalize. That's why they're pilots. That's why they're good at what they do. Do things come up from time to time, like in any professional life? Absolutely, and they can be addressed. Both our union and the company work together to try to get these folks help. Every recurrent training, we are told about this and reinforce that this is available to us.
Richard Quest, what's your analysis?
I think you can go so far as to try and protect against the rogue pilot or the pilot that wants to do that, but you can only go so far. I'm not sure what more you do. You see, Wolf, at the end of the day, there is a man or a woman that has their hands on the wheel or the side stick, and at a particular point they are going to lift that plane into the air or put that plane down onto the ground. And yes, there may be moments when they can do it dramatically by getting rid of somebody out of the cockpit, and there could be a two-cockpit rule and all those sort of things. But if a pilot really wants to commit suicide in that way, there are ways to do it. And I think that, as Les Abend says, there's not an epidemic. We've had 2 or 3, all right, high-profile cases, but I'm not sure what more you do short of having everybody looking over their shoulder and the essential lack of trust. If you lose trust in your colleague in the cockpit, you will be far worse off than a couple of occasions where this has happened.
You know, Tom Fuentes, A year ago, as we all know, MH370 disappeared. No cockpit voice recorder, no flight data recorder. We have no idea where that plane is. It presumably is in the bottom of the ocean someplace. There was a lot of speculation early on that maybe one of those pilots from MH370 wanted to do what we just saw apparently happen with this plane in the French Alps. This is going to revive that speculation as a result of what has now been declared by the authorities in France and Germany.
It probably will, but I spoke with a senior Malaysian police officer just about 2 weeks ago, and who's told me again that to date, nothing has been determined about the captain or the co-pilot on that flight to indicate any psychological problem, mental problem, reason to commit suicide and crash that plane on purpose. And that may happen in this case. When the investigators in Germany examine the co-pilot's hard drives and social media, email accounts, phone calls, who he's talked to, what he said to various friends, colleagues, neighbors, they may find nothing. They may find no indication for why he did this. And as Miles O'Brien has said frequently, there's no black boxes inside people's heads in that cockpit.
Yeah, well, if they find the black boxes from the Malaysian plane, maybe we'll get a clue as to what happened, if in fact the pilot or co-pilot may have been responsible for the disappearance.
But maybe only a clue.
Well, maybe we'll see if we ever find those black boxes flying, and they haven't even found a scrap of that plane yet. So obviously that mystery continues. Everybody stand by. Much more coming up with the crash of Flight 9525. Much more on the victims, their grieving families. Also, there's other major news we're watching right now. Airstrikes in Yemen. Saudi Arabia taking the lead with fighter planes and ground troops. But the damage to anti-terror efforts may be beyond salvage right now. We're taking a closer look. The House Homeland Security Committee Chairman here in Washington, Congressman Mike McCall, he's standing by live.
Open Court, in association with RADA.
The #1 doubles team in the world has no trouble drawing a crowd at Indian Wells.
I'm hoping 2015 is going to be a big year. You know, we're not young pups anymore. We're kind of the veterans of the tour. This tournament has a lot of special memories for us. We came down here when we were 10 years old, saw Andre Agassi for the first time, just ran around, got autographs.
The Twins know they'll soon be called to centre court to defend their title, but first their band will be asked to take centre stage in the tennis garden.
Yeah, this is definitely a high point for the Bryan Bros Band. We feel like rock stars, you know, that people come out to see our music, which is kind of a cool thing. And we get the drummer from the Counting Crows, he comes in. It is the pinnacle of our music year.
The number of billionaires in the world has more than doubled in the last 5 years. There's more ideas, more opportunities. It's created more wealth, just not for all. As the economic gaps widened, the issue is, are you getting your fair share? The business world has many options, so we'll sift through the jargon, making you better informed, ready to get your slice of the pie.
The most amazing places I've been to in the Middle East aren't those you can walk or drive to. They are in the eyes of the first Arab woman fighter pilot breaking down barriers at supersonic speed, in the smile of a young UAE student determined to shed stereotypes and make her way in the world. These are places you'll an inspiration.
Every country has an identity, a history, customs, culture. A unique landscape that determines how its people live, work, and play. Now get an insider's look with CNN's On the Road. From recovering an ancient heritage to the next generation of IT education. Join us as we explore Armenia. CNN On the Road, Armenia, Saturday on CNN, in association with Corporación America.
Join Michael Holmes and Amara Walker for original reporting on the day's global news. CNN Today, tonight on CNN. Join John Vors and Zain Asher, then Errol Barnett and Rosemary Church for original reporting on the day's global news. CNN News, Monday through Thursday on CNN.
Pie. What a delicious way to think about wealth. It shows who's getting how much and who's left wanting more. In today's business world, we want to know how money is made and spent and who decides where it goes. On Quest Means Business, we'll meet those people and hear their ideas, and along the way, help you find your profitable piece of the pie.
Quest Means Business, tonight only on CNN.
We'll get back to the breaking news on that plane crash in the French Alps. Much more information coming in right now, horrendous information. But there's other news that's breaking right now, just coming into CNN, including this disturbing development. A United States Army National Guard soldier and his cousin now face charges of conspiring to provide material support to the terrorist group ISIS. Federal prosecutors say both men were arrested yesterday. Our justice reporter Evan Perez is joining us with the latest. This is very disturbing information. Tell us what we know.
Well, Wolf, this is very, very disturbing. Hassan Edmonds is a 22-year-old specialist with the Army National Guard. He was arrested at Midway Airport as he was trying to get on a flight to go to Cairo and eventually to try to fight in Syria. Apparently, he knows that the government is looking for people who are trying to go through Turkey to try to get to Syria, so he decided he was going to try this route. Instead, his cousin, Jonas Edmonds, 29 years old, is also charged in this case, and according to the Justice Department, what he's accused of doing, he was planning that once his cousin left the country, that he was going to use his army uniform to try to attack a U.S. military facility in Illinois.
How did this guy get on the FBI, the investigators' radar?
Well, it looks like what happened is that the FBI noticed that there were some postings online. So an FBI undercover agent contacted Hassan Edmonds and decided to start a conversation over which a period of several months they described plots to try to go join ISIS and do essentially to try to carry out attacks both here, inspired by what they saw happen in Paris, by the way, and also carry out, try to join ISIS to try to carry out attacks there. I should note that in the last 18 months, Wolf, the National Security Division at the Justice Department has prosecuted or is prosecuting, in the process of prosecuting, 32 people for traveling or trying to provide some kind of assistance to terrorist groups. 18 of those have involved ISIS.
And the accusation in this particular case, an Army reservist, he was going to use his military background experience to try to fight, to try to help ISIS in the battle against the United States.
Right, exactly. And that's a disturbing allegation here.
It certainly is. All right, stand by. We're going to get more. The chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, Mike McCall, we're going to get his reaction to what is going on, as well as the dramatic escalation and now a full-scale war that's unfolding in Yemen, Saudi Arabia, and other Arab countries. They are now invading. They're moving in. They're fighting proxies backed by Iran. This is an escalating and very dangerous situation.